All right, so for our session, we have Miss Carolyn Binkley, and she is from the Wilson County FCE clubs. And you've been doing these sessions for the past couple of years, I've been told. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit about what we're going to be doing today.
Okay. So am I ready to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the class. We're going to make a little bag to hold our mat and our rulers if we go somewhere out on a group sewing. I have a couple quilt clubs and stuff that I go to, and it makes it just real handy to have this bag. We're going to do a technique that I like, and I think when people find out how to do it, it's called quilt as you go. And this way, when you sew your strips onto your batting, you are quilting it, so you don't have to do any extra quilting. You can do this on the back if you want to, or you can put a solid on here. And then you would have to quilt this one in some form. I have a stitch on mine it's sort of a S curve, and I stretch it out, and normally I'll go at a 45-degree angle, but this one I did straight, and it sews a curvy line, and when you come back the other way, it looks like you have puzzle pieces. And I love that, and it's so easy to do if you're doing something small. Now, if I get anything real big, then it goes to a long arm quilter. And luckily, I have a friend that does that, so I now have somewhere that. And if anybody ever does have something they need quilted by a long arm, if you let me know, then I can help you out. Okay, first of all, I'm gonna get my sample over here. You're going to start out cutting out all of your pieces. Now I use what's called a jelly roll. This is where you get pieces that are all coordinating fabrics. So you don't have to worry. Now the only thing is, if you're going to do a solid back, you would want to find something that would match to put on the back. Sometimes these jelly rolls have yardage that go with them, but most of the time they don't. You'd have to buy something else in that. And these we don't have to worry about cutting because they're already cut out for us. We have 2 pieces of batting that we have to have, and they're cut at 21 by 26. I use a cotton. I use 100%. You can use the 80-20. If you're gonna do any hand quilting, you do not want to use the 100% cotton, because I've tried and the needle just will not go through it. So the 80-20 would be more the one that you could do any hand quilting with it in that. So we've got the 2 pieces, which one will be the front and one will be the back. I have already done one of the fronts, and then this is the one that I did. And it's got your pockets, which have not been sewn down yet. That's why my little wonder clips are in there. But this is what we're going to do and do with the handles on there. So, and then of course you have 2 pieces that's the same 21 by 26 for your lining in that. So, and what I'm going to do real quick and go over to the sewing machine, I'm going to switch my camera. And we're going to go over to the sewing machine. Okay. I don't know, you most likely won't be able to see me, but you can hear me. but hopefully you can see. I know it's a little blurred. One thing about these little things, they can't be focused really good, but I think it's good enough for you to do. When you start it, you're going to take one of your batting pieces, and I put a little pin up here so I would know what the top was in that. Just so I'll know where to start each time or whatever. Just I forget which one's top, which one's bottom. And what we're going to do first is you're going to take one of your strips. If I need to back off. Can you see this all right? Do I need to adjust the camera? But you're going to take your first strip and you're going to lay it on the end with the right side of the fabric up. Then your second strip, you're going to put it on the first strip, right side down. And then we're going to sew it all the way down. Now, if you want to make one of your pockets to have on here, what I have done is I have not cut my extra off. I just go ahead and sew down it. And that way, when you cut this off straight, you have this to use as your pocket. You've already sewn it together, and all you've got to do is press it in that. So I'm going to come back up, and pressing as you go is very, very important because it makes sure that you have your pieces out where you don't have little puffy places and whatever on here. And before I go any further, I got to hook up my iron. So excuse me for just a second. Okay. And in your instructions, it's showing you how I've got these two together in a sew. So I'm going to take my next well, if you like me, you can't find nothing in your sewing. All right. I've got them sort of in order of the way I'm going to sew them on there, so I know how to sew them. And I like to put pieces that look good together, and other pieces not. So now when you have this second one open, you're going to take your next piece and you're going to go right side down and you're going to match it. Right here. And we're doing 1/4 inch seam allowances. And then we're just going to sew the 1/4 inch. Every once in a while I'll stop, make sure I'm even. You can pin this if you feel more comfortable pinning. Get my hand in the way. And on my 1/4 inch, I have a little guide. I really like them a whole lot because you can put the edge of your fabric on it. And most machines will sell one that is both, that has those on there. Now, since I've got the end of that, I'm going to make sure the rest of this is done. And then I'm going to just sew it on down. And I usually, you can back stitch it if you want to, but since we're going to be using it pretty quick and not doing a lot of thing with it, I just don't bother doing it. And cut it off. Then we're going to come and then turn this one over. I'm not sure if my iron is hot yet. Let's see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my camera back to my other camera. And I'm going to bring my piece over here to the ironing board. And I want you to. Okay. Don't need my mouse. And you don't have to worry about which way you sew your seam allowance, because in this it can only go one way. And then you're going to take and press it. Make sure you got a good. Now my little iron that I've got does do steam, but I didn't put any water in it, but it'll do okay. And just press it down to where it's at the end, because you're going to be cutting those off, and then you'll press them again. And now we're ready to go back to the sewing machine and do a second one on the next one. So I'm just going to go, and I'm going to switch. I'll be switching cameras back and forth so you can see what I'm doing. Unfortunately, I can't have both going at the same time, so I haven't figured that out yet. And then we're going to then do the next one, put it on the top of the other one with the right side down, or right sides together. And then go and start stitching again. And you're going to do this until you fill up your whole top. And you would take it over and cut and press. And since Charlene is just you here too, what I'm going to do is take my, get up here where you can see me. Where I cut off the bottom, you're going to take it, and I'm going to take these off for the moment. You're going to take it and fold it in half. And what I did with this is I just stitched close to the seam to hold it down so it wouldn't shift on me. Now the other pocket, I got just another material that was in the color tone and doesn't match the design at all, but it's a coordinating fabric. And I made this one about 3 inches, I guess, taller than the other one. So you've got 2 widths. Now you could put a third pocket on there if you wanted to. That's just strictly up to you of what you do. So you're going to take the thing what you've got. You're going to take the bottom edge. Whoop. Drunk this morning. All right. You want to lay your tallest pocket first. So I'm going to take the raw edge of the pocket, because the top is folded. So the way that they're due, whatever the depth you want, you double it so you can fold it over. That gives your lining in between it. So then we're going to take and we're going to line it up with the bottom seam. Then take your next one and line it up also at the bottom seam. And they should match up. And then I'm gonna put my clips in. I'm a big thing on wonder clips and not pins, because they're just easier. You know, when you pin, a lot of times you get a raised area. I don't like that. And then I'm just gonna sort of pin on each side of at the top of this bottom thing, just to hold it together while I go to the sewing machine and sew it. So let's go back to the machine. Let's switch cameras. Okay. I have an automatic cutter, and sometimes it doesn't leave too much up at the top. So again, I'm going to, I wouldn't do a full 1/4 inch seam at this point, do more like an 1/8 of a seam, just to tack it down so it's not going anywhere, is what you want to do with this, because when we finish the bag and we use the 1/4 inch seam allowance, then you won't see this seam line in there too. And that, and then we're just going to stitch right across it. Get my hand out of the way. For some reason, this is not moving the way it's supposed to. Oh. You're always going to have something that's going to go wrong while you're sewing. And you just got to stop and fix it. And the majority of the time, if you have a problem, it's either the way you got it threaded, something's jumped out, or you caught your thread. So it's best just to start all over again. I'm going to see where I stopped off at. Got it. Because all you're doing at this point is just tacking it down. So it won't move anywhere. So now the bottom is is attached, so the pocket's not going to go anywhere. And cut off his ribs. Okay. Now, what you would do here is you're going to decide how big your pockets are. So like if I wanted 2 of these strips to be a pocket, now remember you're going to have your seam allowance over here, so take in consideration for that 1/4 inch seam when you size your pockets in that. And one of the things that I did when I was making mine, if you know what you want to put in your pockets, like if I wanted to put this box of the clips in here, I would go in here and sort of figure out where I might need to do it so it's got space to expand and make sure. So for that particular box, it's going to take the width of 3 of those things. So I'm going to start, and I'm just going to use the seam as my guide. Let's see what I'm doing. I put it over here, it slides on the floor, so. And I am just going to stitch. I'm just going to stitch up there. Now, if you need to draw a line, let's say you're not going, you're not following a seam. Then you can mark it. So I'm going to go up through here. Now your pockets are going to be pretty much the same or both layers. And if you feel like you can't really do it real straight, you can always, I love these, they're called friction pins. They're markers that will come off when you iron it, and you won't see it. And I've had better luck with these than anything. And most of them are refillable, so you can buy refills to put in them. But you could take you, okay, what did I do with it? I don't have it here, but I can follow it pretty good. You can take and draw you a line. Decided I didn't scoop it out. I need to put it. And I use these, and I keep one in the pocket of my thing. But you can draw you a line. Of course, if you use a ruler, you'll be that, or if you can judge it. And that's not real straight, but I'm hoping I can stay straight when I actually sew it. So then I'm going to finish sewing. And when I get to the top of the pocket, I am going to use my reverse and come back in that up. So it reinforces that top, because you're going to have a lot on here that's going to pull in that way. It'll do. And like I said, you can put as little, I did one smaller pockets to put either like my scissors in it or my little marking pins. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to finish up and make one small pocket, just like I made the other one. And the number of pockets that you make are strictly up to you. I would not use one that is real wide, because it may want to poke out more when you have, but you could go 3 or 4 inches sort of like I did on the first one. And then I'm just gonna come up and I'm gonna stitch on this to give me 2 extra pockets in that. But again, when you're doing it, if you have certain things that you want to put in it, then you sort of figure out how big it's got to be to give that opening a chance, so that will fit in there to its snug. And actually, it wouldn't have hurt that when you came to that first pocket, is to also do, come on, go back forward, to go ahead and reinforce it too. So as you're sewing and you get here, reinforce this, then continue going and reinforce, because this is going to have pull on it too. Now, one should work, but two, doing the back is actually better on that. So now that we have those, now what we can do, so we know that these won't flop and get in the way when we put our bag together, you can come over here and do just like you did on the bottom and stitch close to the edge to tack down your, but I wouldn't do this until you did your pockets, because you don't want to get any puffers or anything like that in it. And you don't need to worry about back doing it, because it's going to be in the seam. So then I'm going to come back from this side. And this one I'm going to actually start from the other end, because so I have more of my material going out of the machine instead of having to roll it up inside. I like to sew with my needle down. So if you stop, you don't use your place. Sometimes the piece will get split back and you'll want to straighten it back out. So that way with the needle down, if you don't have the thing to make it stay down on its own, and I really should have gone the other way with this, because I'm getting some pull on it. So I'm not going to fiddle with doing the rest of it, but you would go down, and really it is better to start at the bottom. So if it's going to move, it's going to move up instead of hovering as you go down. And sometimes you don't realize that till you do it. And then normally I would sit here and pick out my stitches and turn it around and do it the other way. But I'm not going to, I won't do it here because it's going to take too long to do it. All right, once you've done this and you've got your pocket sewn, you're ready to start putting your handles on. Now, on your handles, you can get you can use webbing if you want to. You can get webbing and cover it, or you can make some. I just use one of the other jelly rolls pieces, one of these that was with the thing, and made a tube. I put right sides together, and on the second page, it's sort of showing you what you need to do. You want it to be sturdy, so I have put batting in it. If I like to use the webbing a lot, you want a cotton webbing instead of a nylon webbing, because it's easier if you make it to hold on your shoulder. In that, if you can match the color, good. If not, you can make one to match. And what I did is, after I put my right sides together and I sewed a seam, then I went over and I turned it. If you don't have tube turners, I took a safety pin, stuck it in the end right in here. And let me see, I don't have a safety pin handy. And then just turned it right side out. And then I cut my batting to what the width is here. And you can do the same thing with the batting by taking your pin and moving it in until it's in there. I had a elastic thing that pulls elastic through that I used on this. So it just depends on what kind of gadgets you got at home, but you want to make your seam in the middle. That way you're not going to see it and it's not going to be on the edge. And when you put a handle on here, I sort of just take it and go in half and then stick it up. And what we're going to do it on the edge at the top. And again, you might want to still, once you get past where you're sewing this, take your pin out and stick it up here. So you, especially on the back side, so you know what's the top and what's the bottom. On the front, you'll pretty much know because you've got the pockets. But to get it where it goes straight, have it where your one that doesn't have the seam goes down, and you're going to have like a little curve in here that's going to make it sort of look flat when you turn it on or come to a point. Of course, once you get your batting in there, you want to go and stay stitch on each side just to help to hold that down more. But then you're going to figure out on your first one how far apart you want your handles. And I just sort of laid mine to see that looks, or you can measure from the ends, from the edge over a certain amount, the edge over, and then put them on there. And then you're going to put them on, and then you're going to tack them, pin them, or pinch them. And then I like to go and stitch over them, stitch across here close to the seam just to hold them in place. So later on when we sew, they're not going to go anywhere in that. Then you're going to take your lining. The biggest thing is getting your front and back done and making your straps. After that, it's pretty simple to go through. But what I do here, so we don't have to bind it, is I took my piece of what's going to be my lining and I laid it on top with right sides together, if you have a right side or a wrong side. And then you're going to sew it across. You'll get your handles in there so it's stitched out. So once you're through, you have this. There's your lining. It's hooked onto the top. That way you don't have to put bias tape. And then you got your sleeve, your handle coming down, and your pockets. Then you're going to take it and take your other piece, like this, that you put your lining on. Now, granted, this doesn't have my lining on it, but you're going to put it face down. And you're going to, well, when you put your things on the other side, I always like to lay it down and line them up with my ones on the other side, so I know I've got them. You can measure in to get a starting point, but then make sure that they match up when you're putting them. And see, right now I don't have mine out on this, but you want to make sure that your handles are the same on both sides. So if this had the lining on it, then I'm going to meet my seams right here on each side first. Then I'm going to go and make sure everything matches. If it's a little off, you can always trim it or just take a little bit bigger seam allowance if one is a little longer than the other. And then your other piece of lining is going to be up here with this. Then what you're going to do in the lining section, you're going to come, a little bit up from the center. You're going to sew all the way around and all the way back up. And then when you come down this other side, you're going to leave an opening about, 4 to 5 inches on the side. And then once you've done that, you're going to turn this right side out. You're going to go into the hole, and then you're going to pull it out. And then you're going to go to your machine and sew up the hole, you know, turn them under just like the seam would have been, and then top stitch it because nobody's going to see it. It's going to be inside your purse. And then when that's finished and it's turned out, you just stuff your lining down into the bottom, and you've got your bag. Then I come back up and reinforce my handles like I would come here and go in here and do a block and maybe a X or a couple going back and forth to reinforce. This would be after it would be turned down. Then you're going to come back here and reinforce it because there's going to be a lot of weight on this because my bag is pretty heavy when I have all my stuff in it. So you want to reinforce those handles. And maybe you can see it on this one. Okay, on this one, I just did some back and forth up here. I went across down below the seam line and then another one up close to the top in that to do that. And this one, let's see if I can show you. All right. When you've sewn it and turned it, this is what you're going to have. You can see I've got some other stuff in here that I didn't know was in there. But you're going to have like this. And then I've taken my side and I just stitched it. Let's see, I don't know if you can see that very good. I just stitched it closed right here. Then you're going to sit there and open your bag and stuff your lining back down inside. And then just push it all the way down. And you get it in there. And then I come back and top stitch all the way around the top, just to keep that from trying to come out in that. And then you finished your bag and you're ready to put your stuff in it and then lay it on the table and put it in there. Now I can, if you want to watch, I will finish doing, I need to finish doing what I'm doing since we have the time and I only had the one person to actually finish up the other side and do it for you. So I basically told you what to do. I will show you again by actually doing this one during our time. And everything I've done should be in your instruction sheet. I tried to put pictures so you could understand what I was doing. Sometimes instructions don't click, but if you see a picture, then you realize what's happening. So I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and work on the other, and you can watch me as I go, and I will finish the bag on the for the recording. If you have any questions, you have any questions, Shirley?
No, I don't. No, I really don't. I thank you. And I'm sorry that I'm the only person that tuned
That,
it.
that is no problem whatsoever. I mean, in that, but I will continue making this and doing it for the video for the people that did not get to do it, because I was hoping people would make it, as we were going. That's why I gave us the time to actually do it and finish it. Because some people haven't made stuff as much as some other people have. So
Correct. So anyway, thank you, Carolyn. And I'm going to leave the meeting, and you just press
you might be able to put in, go to the other login, and you might can go to another class.
Okay, thank you. And you have a blessed day.
All right. And
Thank
I am going to go ahead, Grace, and finish this so it will be on the video.
That sounds great.
In that. So I'm going to go back in. Actually, I'm going to press here for just a minute where I have done this side and this stitch. And I'm going to switch cameras. Back over here to the sewing machine. Get the glare off my light. Then I'm going to pick my next piece. And some of my pieces were cut a little different than a normal jelly roll would be cut. So I have some salvage edges. So I'm going to sew to cut the salvage, get the salvage edges out of the way. It just means you may have to use another strip to complete the row. You don't have to use, you don't even have to use all the same size strips. If you got a bunch of, you want to make it scrappy, where it's just all different colors, you can take 2.5 strips, a 2-inch strip, and sew them across until you fill it. You don't have to be, they don't have to all be the same size to make it work. So this would be good if you had partial jelly rolls, or you had 3 or 4 coordinating fabrics and you wanted to use them, and then you can cut your own strips to use. You just keep cutting and adding until the batting for the size that you're making would be done. So I'm gonna go ahead and too fast on these tables, and they like to jump around. I am a person that likes to sew on a flat surface. I guess that's kind of my age, because back when I learned how to sew, that's all we had was flat surfaces. We didn't have the free arms like we do today. So I have what they call an extension table that helps me still sew flat. I can sew the other way, but I prefer to sew flat. I'm not going to switch camera, but I'm going to go over here and press it, and I'll be back for the next one. Because again, as I say, pressing is very, very important in any kind of sewing, quilting, piecing. And if you're doing just regular seams and you're not doing the quilt as you go, you want to make sure that you press on both sides, because you don't want to have any little pieces overlapping because you didn't get it pulled, because that will make it pucker, and that can also distort whatever it is that you're making. So you want to try to stay away from that as much as possible. Put my next strip on. Usually the cutting out and getting ready takes the longest, and that's why with jelly rolls, you don't have to worry about cutting your strips because they're already cut for you. And you can just start in sewing right away. Yeah, another thing that would work good with here, if your machine has one or you get one, is if you have a walking foot. Because the walking foot, it has feed dogs on the top, and they work with your feed dogs on the bottom, and it will keep your fabric from wanting to slide or bunching up because it's pulling from top and bottom instead of just bottom. That's why you get where if you sew and they were the same length, but if you get through sewing, one is a little longer than the other, it's because it has shifted and maybe stretched a little bit, and that causes one to be a little longer. That's why you always want to have extra when you're doing like strips, so you've got enough to cut off and square it off, just in case it gets moved on you. I use an 80-12 needle for most of my stuff. Some people use 75s. If you're working on a heavier fabric, you want to use a 90-14. Because you don't want, the bigger the number are, the larger the shank of the needle is, and more of a hole than they'll put in the fabric in there. And sometimes you don't want that bigger hole in there. In everything. So. Now the professionals will tell you that you need to change your needles after every 5,000 stitches or something like that. They want to sell needles, and they will tell you that. But the things that you can tell that your needles are getting dull is if it starts catching your fabric and snagging, or it starts skipping stitches or doesn't look right. And then most of the time it's because it has a burr on the end of the needle. And if you take your needle out, you can rub it across your finger, and if you feel something rough, then you know it's time to change your needle. I use, and before I even knew that much about sewing, I would just use it until it got broke, and then I wondered sometimes why my seams or my stitches didn't look so good. And then when I actually got more into sewing and I started working for a place that sewed machines, I learned a whole lot. So I like to pass those tips along so you know. A lot of them will tell you to change your needle with each new project you do. That's okay too. But again, you can do a lot with one needle before you do anything. Be right back. I'm gonna go press. And while I'm doing this too, my front and back most likely do not match. They do not have to. You're not going to see them both sides at the same time. If some of your fabric's a little uglier than others, use your ugly ones on the back. Because then if you put it up your machine on top of it, you're only going to see the pretty side anyway. But this is a good project for using up your strips that maybe you cut more than you needed and you keep them. And you can use them to make something that's more scrappy. See, right back again. Hopefully my last one. If you didn't have the salvage, I don't know if you can see, there's little pin holes like in there. That's usually what the salvage is. Normally, if I was sewing and making regular pattern, I would cut my salvages off. But since this is just straight sewing and it's sewed the way it is, it's not going to hurt. Because I know when I used to make my skirts and stuff like that, a lot of times I would use the salvage side when I put a zipper in, because I knew I had nice straight seams, because I hadn't cut it and maybe got a little wiggly when I cut it. I forgot to say that. Oh, no. Go back and say that. This would have been better if I had done it at the beginning. Go back in here. Well, since I'm not going to use, no, I want to do it because I want you to see how I did the other. Do this. And I don't want people to be afraid that they make a boo-boo, because we all do. I don't care how long we sew. We're going to always end up ripping out a seam if it's not straight, or if it gets snagged and we have to do it. That's going to happen to anybody that sews. I don't care how long you have sewed. It's just going to happen. And if anybody says they don't ever make a mistake, then I'm not so sure. So, I'm going to switch my camera, because right at the moment I'm through stitching for a little bit. Look, see, I'm a little short, so I would have to have another strip, and I'm trying to think if I brought any more strips. May not have. I had a few of those with the along the seam. Sure it's all nice and pressed. And enough of one of those. And then what I'm gonna do with this is I'm going to then take it to what would be my cutting board, and I'm actually gonna turn it this way because that way I can see better of what I'm doing. And I might end up, since I'm not going to use this side as my pocket, I will take my ruler and actually, you will change your fabric around several times because to the best way to cut. And I do like to use rotary cutters. Okay, what did I do with mine? Here we go. This one, at first I didn't like these kind, but now I've got used to them and I really like them. But I like one that when you release the handle, it covers the blade, because that blade is very, very sharp and it will cut you, and it hurts worse than a paper cut in that. And you always want to make sure that if you set your rotary cutter down, that you close that off so you or somebody else doesn't brush against it and cut themselves in that. So I'm going to take my ruler here and I'm going to cut this off. Sometimes when your blades get a little dull, you got to go back over it. Now I see I missed another one in here, but what I'm going to do is show you what you would do with this piece if you want to use it as your pocket. And I'm going to go here and I'm just going to press all my seams in one direction. And this is where I usually do the back first. Then I come back and give it just a little bit of a snug pull, so I know I'm pulling out anything that might be lapped over, because that will make a difference in your size when you go to do it. To get it nice and smooth. And then what you'll do with this, you will take it and turn it the wrong sides together to make your pocket. And that's how I made the pocket before. And then you will put the raw edge on the raw edge of your top. And since I'm only putting pockets on one side, I'm not going to use this. But what I am going to do, since I need another piece on this, since I didn't calculate quite right with what I had, I'm going to take, and this is when it is called ripping out seams. And so I'm going to take these. But this is like what would happen if you were in your own sewing room and you have to pick stuff out. There's several different ways to pick it. You can get it started and then just put your seam ripper in a couple stitches and to pull them out. You can go on the wrong side, and on one side go about 3 or 4 stitches and break and break the stitch and keep going down, and then you can go back to the other side and take the thread and pull it, and it'll all come out at one time. And it's just a preference to what you like. But there's always a fix. And with this being right on the edge, a lot of that will be taken up in the seam allowance. So you won't, in this case, you won't notice it that much. Plus it will be on the back side. I thought I'd put in my extra pieces because you like to have some extra pieces just in case in that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to sew my pieces together because they're not long enough to go down the whole side. So I'm going to sew them across the top. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and press my seam. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and now sew it here. So this side's sort of going to be two-tone, and you can do that too if you're using pieces that you have. You can always piece two pieces together to make a longer strip, and they even have another kind of variety and sort of a patchwork type thing. So I'm going to go sew this real quick, and then I'll be back and we'll go from the next step. So now I'm just going to turn this over. press this down. Then I'm going to turn this over. Since I don't need all of it, I am going to cut it down to match the batting. And if you haven't used a rotary cutter, you do have to have a special mat to do it. You don't want to do it on your tabletop or anything because it will cut it up. And so now I'm going to put those back. And now I've got everything covered up that I need to have covered up. Snip that off real quick. Okay. Now what you would do next on this is take your handle. Oops, wrong handle. And I'm going to bring my other piece over here. And actually, I'm going to lay it down first. And I'm going to lay this one down a little bit. I'm not sure if you can see this or not, what I'm doing. Okay. I sort of laid this out, and I actually have one piece that's bigger than the other. Because I think I actually sewed my stripes the wrong way, but I'm going to put this way. And then take your other handle. Make sure that the seam size is up. And then I will match where my other handle is. And then match where this other handle is. So I know my handles are in the same spot. And then I'm going to change my camera. Whoop, I think I hit it on the right one. After. Well, I lost the camera. Well, sorry for the confusion. Okay, this is the one I have here. Don't know if you can be able to see. I got a really good picture of my code. Oh. And then I'm going to come over here, make sure it's straight, and I'm going to come close to the edge, and I'm going to stitch the handle in place. You could leave a little bit off the edge, so when you turn it, you've got a little bit more of a foundation to do your tack down in there. So once I have this done, I'm going to take the other piece of my lining. And I'm going to place it, which would be right sides together. This is my lining. Since this doesn't really have a right or wrong side, or it does, one of my sides is shiny. And I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to use my 1/4 inch seam. And I want to make sure that my handle is straight in here. And if you can see what I did. So it doesn't move on me. And then when I put the lining, I'll just hold that down so it doesn't move. And then I'm going to sew. Let's see. And I'm gonna make sure this handle is straight and not turn a little bit. Around here. And now I have sewed it where I have the lining, and here's my pockets or my handles right here. I need to do a little bit of trimming. I think I may have actually cut my lining what I had, and I just left it and figured I could square it off afterwards. So that is what I'm going to do. Right here. And I'm going to square it off to match the batting. And what I'm going to do on this, you can see that my bottom edge is not very straight because of where I cut the other off. So I'm going to, when I cut this extra here, I'm going to straighten that up also. So you can see. Because if I don't do that and I try to go do the seam, I may have a wacky seam on the bottom of the bag. Even though my batting is not quite straight either, I'm going to straighten it up so the bottom is straight. Okay. looks pretty good. All right. Now I'm going to take this one and I want to put my handles down. And then I want to meet putting right sides together. Making sure my handles are down here too, so we don't get them caught in there. And I'm going to match, actually, this one, I didn't really need that piece after all. This one is a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match this side first. And I'll take my two seams here. And it's, if you will take in, and you can figure this out before you do it, I want my top seam, one to be pressed one way and the other one to be pressed the other way. That way when you meet, let me switch boards. Your seams will fit better and it won't be quite as bulky when you sew your seam together. Sorry for I'm not a pro, I'm just a sewer just like you are. So again, I'm going to make the front side, and since one I ironed this way and the other one is ironed that way, when I match the seam, and this is a point where I do use a pin. And stick your pin right into where your seam line is. And then look to the other side and see if it's there too, which mine isn't. So then you can take it back off because you want to butt those two seams together. And then pin them, try pinning again. Pretty good at my top, and I'm only going to be doing a 1/4 inch seam, so. I'm going to pin that to get it there. Then I'm going to go around. Using my clips again. Your best buy on these is going to Amazon. You can get a whole lot more for the money, and you can actually even get them in containers like I'm doing. You always want to try to lay it down and you get it straight. This is a lot easier to do when you're at home. And I'm going to clip these also. go back and clip, put these together. This is the side I got to. That's my other corner now. I've got this bigger, for some reason, they're not exactly the same size. And if I was at home with my longer cutting board, I'd go ahead and cut this off before I started sewing. But I'm going to sew with this side up and then match it up when I sew. So I'm just going to leave that. So now, let me see if I got both my cameras back. Yeah. Okay. You're going to start sewing on the lining side. So I'm going to start a little ways past. Don't start on an edge or anything because it's too hard to get it closed without a lot of tension and stuff. So I'm going to start here. And I would take a few stitches and then back it up. And that's going to put some extra support for when you're turning it around, turning it right side out. And then I'm going to sew. If you're using a 1/4 inch foot, where this bar right here comes across where your needle's inside of it, if you go to the edge of your fabric to that point, where the front of that foot, I don't know that you can see it. I can use this one to let you see it better. Oh, that camera's not off. Then, and with your needle down and your foot up, then you're going to pivot and turn, and that should be exactly the 1/4 inch, because where that foot goes in and is squared in there is your 1/4 inch from the other edge. My machine has an automatic pivot. It raises the foot for me. And all of them do that. I'm getting to thicker, so it's gonna sound different. And this again is when a walking foot would come in really handy. Camera. And you can do this same technique with making any size bag that you want and putting pockets. If you wanted pockets in the lining, you would put your pockets in your on your lining fabric before you sewed it on to your other to the other, putting it before you put it together. Because I do that, I take a basic pattern and then I add as many pockets as I want to it. And actually what I'm gonna do here, since this is thicker, I'm gonna actually not do a 1/4 inch seam. I'm gonna do a little bit bigger seam. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my 1/4 inch foot off, because it's hard with the guide to do straight. I'm gonna put my regular foot on, and I'm gonna go back, and I'm gonna go and put the outside edge of my foot on the raw edge, and I'm gonna, so this gives you about a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead. And also, if it gets a little hard to do, you can go in and increase your stitch length. Normally it's on either 2 or 2.5. You can go up to 3. And that way it's not as close, so it makes it smooth better along the way. Because when you get into that, you've got 2 bucks of batting plus your fabric. And you're going over seams. And I'm going to step too far. So I'm going to put my foot back in and I'm going to back stitch a couple stitches. And turn this back around. And now I'm more in line with what I'm doing. Make sure you don't get your handles if they seem to be in the way. Just slide them back over so you don't get them. And you're going to get some of those handles, so sometimes it's best to Now, I'm getting close to where, when I started right here. So I want to leave between a 4 and a 5 inch thing. So if I leave a 5 inch, and I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to give me a mark to where I want to stop. So I'm going to finish to that point. And then I'm going to go take the back stitch and come back forward and then cut my thread. Now, something that I haven't been doing is clipping some of my other threads as I go, where I quilted and stuff like that. Now, to keep the bulk, I'm going to come back over here now and cut off this excess that I have over here. Because I don't want that bulk in there when I go to turn it. And this is sort of how you can tell if your rotary cutter, the blade is getting dull, because it won't cut through when you get into the thick stuff. So you'll know it's time to change your blade. And make sure that you don't just put it in the trash, because if somebody was to reach in there, then they would could get cut on it. If you buy the rotary cutters, they come in a little bin, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put it back in that bin and you know, mark on it that it's old. Or it might be all right. I have a separate cutter that I use when if I want to cut paper, and you can use that blade, because that blade will cut paper where it won't cut the fabric. It's just like your scissors. You want to keep your scissors. I'm dropping stuff all over everywhere. It cuts that better because there's not any batting in it. Now what we're going to do, first of all, take your scissors, and we want to snip off the corners on all four. You want to cut just up a little way from where the sewing corner is, and do that on all four corners. And it looks like there I didn't catch my pocket. So I'm going to come back over here and sit me a little wider seam right here. So I don't have a hole in the bottom of my pocket, in my lining so some goes through. And you just check all the way around it to make sure that you have caught everything, because if you turn it right side out and find out you haven't got it all the right way, then you're going to have to turn it back to wrong side out and fix it.
Miss
Yeah.
Carolyn, just a reminder, we have about 5 minutes left before this
Okay.
ends.
All right. Well, I'm just about, you're going to take and go inside and always grab a corner, and you're going to start pulling this through. Here. And you're going to smush this down inside the bag. And shake it down. And voila, you are finished with poking out and doing some other than you're finished making your bag. And there we have it. You'll go in and push out the bag. And again, we have finished our bag with our handles. And then, as I had said earlier about going and ironing it and tacking it down and reinforcing your handles. So if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll be glad to help anybody anytime if they need some help. And I hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you later.